What's up, guys, and welcome to another video. I am here to do a quick follow-up on my Guardians of the Galaxy Brain episode. Well, I say quick. I always say quick. My videos end up really long. We'll see how quickly I can get this out of the way. But I wanted to do a follow-up on that. It was a video where I explored YouTubers who are aligned with U.S. State Department organizations and who are being propped up by the war criminals who sold us yesterday's wars. My video did actually provoke a response from them. And I think it's important for me to let my audience know what their response was. So first off, Matthew Tai, aka Lawai86, is the YouTuber who was featured on the US government propaganda outlet's platform Voice of America, and who has also been propped up by Paul Wolfowitz, one of the main architects behind the Iraq War, a conflict that was sold to us on a pack of lies. So I pointed out how his timeline of escaping China made no sense. He said that he escaped China in 2018 and wanted everyone to believe that it was because he was escaping persecution. The People's Liberation Army and actually 3 other governmental bodies were hunting him. This tall tale he continues to tell was one that Voice of America helped reinforce, even though the most junior of fact-checkers on their team would have found out in 5 minutes or less of checking that it was a totally fabricated story. To bring you up to speed, just in case you're not aware of the backstory, let me play a 2-minute excerpt from my last video for you. They even repeated his story of barely escaping China in 2018. They would have been fully aware that this was a fabricated story as well. Matthew Tai said that in 2018, the traffic police, the Public Security Bureau, the People's Liberation Army, and another secret government agency he'd rather not mention were all looking for him. And despite Matt's other videos talking about how much of a surveillance state China is with its high-tech facial recognition systems and ability to find anyone anywhere, they couldn't find a white guy sticking out like a sore thumb, riding around on his self-admitted illegal motorcycle in a second-tier Chinese city. And exactly where was he hiding out? Was it a secret, undisclosed location or a cave somewhere? No, he was at home. I mean, immediately at this point, any media outlet with even a basic commitment to the idea of honesty, integrity, and accuracy, or even just pretending to care about these things would have thrown this story out already. But it gets better. How did he escape China? Was it a speedboat across to Hong Kong or Taiwan? Maybe it was through the mountains in southern China through to Southeast Asia. No. He exited legally through China Exit Customs and Immigration in Shenzhen and was stamped out on his passport, even though a number of governmental bodies were looking for him, including the People's Liberation Army. I mean, at this point, no one, I'm assuming that no one listening to this now would ever imagine that this story is going to get even more spectacular than this. But it does. After escaping China in 2018, 2019, he fires his camera back up and he was back in China, casually, happily talking to his audience about how he had returned to sell his apartment in China. He mentioned nothing about how he managed to evade the Chinese army again while going through Chinese immigration, and apparently was able to escape a second time to America and transfer his funds from selling his apartment out of China as well. Okay, so let's move on to his response. After my video came out calling out this lie, he has since changed his 2019 video title from "I sold my house in China" to "I'm back in China to sell my house in China." You can verify it's been changed by looking at that link through archive.org. He, of course, can't modify the words in his actual video, where he still constantly refers to China and Hong Kong as 2 distinct places, as he always has, as he says he was back in China.
Hey Law Winners, it's Law86 here with another video. And why the hell am I standing here in China? Well, it's because I'm back. Now I'm here without my family. They're back in America waiting for me.
He is now telling everyone that that's not what he meant. He wasn't really in China, and he would have never gone back because, of course, China is a scary place that persecutes people like him, and it basically would have been pretty much suicide to go back. Well, a quick look through his tweet history from that same time period, when he was selling his apartment video in February of 2019, shows that he didn't really think that, and he did indeed go back to China mainland. In response to someone asking if he moved to America, he said that we are back and forth these days. Back and forth, that's important, back and forth. But we set up a company in LA and are pitching a TV show currently. We'll be back in China 3 times per year for the time being. So that was tweeted in July of 2019 after his apartment selling video from February 2019, when he said he wouldn't dare enter the mainland. This was presumably before he figured out the storyline for his TV show that he's pitching, which probably involves painting himself as a character of importance that the Chinese government has been relentlessly hunting down. If that last tweet isn't enough for you, let's get even closer to his apartment selling video date. In May 2019, he said, "In the past 2 months, I've been in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. Haha. I've been all over." So he's listing this not as Hong Kong, China. He's listing this as 3 distinct places. It's obvious what's going on here. And this is really important for his followers to recognize. The previous lies that he has produced has mostly been about external topics. For example, his fabricated Douyin video to prove that there was a genocide going on, his fabricated email from a Chongqing news agency, and the misinformation he put out about documents related to the coronavirus. Here we have a lie directly related to his own personal situation that he keeps doubling down on after being exposed. This is not a person coming to you from a place of honesty. When you recognize that he's willing to fabricate a grand story about himself like this and double down even after he's been caught, you start to begin to understand how dishonest his entire channel is. These are the lengths that he's willing to go to try to convince you of a certain viewpoint. Had he come out and just admitted that he got caught in a lie, it'd still be difficult to recover from, but it'd be far better than what he's doing now. I've actually interacted with some of his fans on Twitter. There's a level of cognitive dissonance at play here that makes me think they won't even really care about these lies. And that's fine. If you're following this guy for entertainment purposes, to each their own, but you should at least be aware that he's lying to you. His subscribers, his fans, and his Patreons who are financially supporting him, you got to understand that you are paying him to lie to you. For some of you, you are paying him to take advantage of your anxiety about China, curated by mainstream media and amplified by people like Matthew Tai, who have found a way to profit from that societal anxiety. Now he's aligned with Paul Wolfowitz and Voice of America. At least it's also important to recognize that you're now aligned with pro-war propagandists, helping to push us closer to the next conflict, and who whitewashes the brutality of American empire for his fans in the State Department. I'll get into that topic a little bit later, but I also wanted to include the rebuttal from his pal Louis Hand. This was an interesting character because he used to protest American-backed wars, and now he's aligning with pro-wars propagandists who are being propped up by the very architects behind the wars that he once protested. It's perplexing to say the least. But to bring you up to speed on this Louis Hand character, here's a quick 2-minute video for you. Now he has the same, bullshit, at least we could have a kumbaya session way of thinking, celebrating his freedom to bitch and complain about something he wasn't able to stop. But that's common stuff. Let's take a look at what he said here. Quite creative there with the BS, aren't you? I'm not making excuses for anything, just telling how it is. Just because that huge protest didn't change anything, at least there was still hope that it could have made a difference. It's a shame you're too pessimistic to understand the concept of hope. Well, Louis, let me also just tell you how it is. The people you continue to bomb and terrorize or who have lost children don't give a shit about your hope. Your huge protest didn't change anything. That's the problem. So why don't you shut up about your superior system and most certainly stop trying to push it on other people until you figure out how to walk away with a bigger accomplishment than just a fuzzy, fleeting feeling of hope that's not going to bring people back. Louis goes on to say, I was still allowed to do it, and although it might not have changed the outcome, it sent a clear message to the government at the time that a lot of people aren't going to take their crap. No, Louis, you did take their crap, and you are going to continue taking their crap over and over again. And Louis, you're going to do one better. You're going to become an active part of the propaganda campaign designed to manufacture consent for the next war. You're ready to answer the call of duty to label anyone who questions the whole-filled Xinjiang genocide narrative with so many similarities to yesterday's now debunked pro-war propaganda, as genocide deniers, like you constantly do, without ever taking a moment to take one critical look at the claims being made. Oh, Lewis, you'll do even more than that. You'll gush like a little fanboy over people like Matthew Tai, who is being propped up by the literal war criminals who lied their way through manufacturing consent for the very wars that you once protested. So he decided to respond to this with a video of his own, showing captions over top, cutting out a lot of the context of what I said, and focusing on what I imagine he thought were the low-hanging fruits here. I offered to discuss this with him live, but he seemed to get cold feet. So let's see what we've got here. I continue to bomb and terrorize people? Just because Daniel has ties to the government, the CCP, and news to me, doesn't mean I do. I haven't bombed anybody. Is this guy seriously nuts? Lewis, no, I'm sorry. You're going to have to own this one, bud. When you are satisfied enough with your system in which you pretend ordinary people like you are empowered and listened to, enough so that you feel ready to advocate spreading it elsewhere, own it and take responsibility for what it produces. You are its cheerleader. And you are aligning yourself with the people who are literally promoted by the people who enabled those bombings. Next, he says, Daniel prefers the type of system where you are thrown into a prison or executed for speaking out against terrible atrocities. This one really speaks for itself. He obviously has no idea who Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, Daniel Hale, or any of these kinds of people are. And keep in mind, once again, he's expressed his approval for his system by the way he's framed this into a statement of preferences. Next, he says, maybe Daniel was hoping that the protest I attended would be dealt with in this manner. So, what he's done here is then he proceeds to share multiple videos of the 1989 Tiananmen Square crackdown. A quick warning here, I'm going to share a couple of graphic images. You can either skip over it, turn the video off from here, or look away when I bring them up. But it's important for illustrating my point here. Because I find that people like this, who constantly have to go all the way back to 3 decades ago to try and make their point about what China is today, do it out of a sense of desperation to hold on to their preconceived ideas about the world and their own superiority. They're also the kind of people who would never reflect for even 1 second what would happen if in his protest they also slaughtered and lynched 200 young police and military officers, hanging them up in the streets like they did in '89, torching and burning military vehicles along the way. We all know the answer, and we also know why he has no interest to take a look at something more recent, like the year of riots in Hong Kong, where hundreds of Molotov cocktails were thrown, police officers were stabbed in the neck, doused in acid, had their teeth knocked out, a construction worker was set on fire, a street cleaner was killed by rioters, and so much more, without the Hong Kong police killing even a single person. Because if he were to compare that with how many people were killed by police in America in the post-George Floyd protests, where they weren't doing anywhere near as much stuff to the police officers, he'd be in a very awkward situation, which would be incredibly inconvenient to his Western superiority complex. I had previously mentioned that this Lewis Hand guy speaks about me on a regular basis. And actually, he even has me in a photo on his artwork on his YouTube channel. So you'd think he'd jump at the opportunity to finally get a chance to speak with me directly, considering how infatuated he is with me. He didn't seem that interested. But anyway, I mentioned in my last video that up until now, I kind of avoided him because something doesn't seem right with this guy, especially when he virtue signals China about things like animal rights and collaborates / helps people like Corey Selby, a fugitive who killed his dogs and has an open arrest warrant on him in Missouri. This is 100% verifiably true information. Well, he doubled down on that, and he started talking about dog meat consumption in China, and then almost immediately showed up on Cory the Dog Killer's channel. But what's perhaps more interesting and relevant is that less than a month ago, Lewis and Matt proclaimed that they don't support any government, and that's what makes them better. Lewis says they just don't get it. We're not the ones supporting any government. In fact, when the war in Afghanistan started, I attended the mass protests against the war. That's the difference between us and the shills. We can say whatever we want. And Matt even says, spot on. Well, ignoring the fact that Matt's previous Afghanistan video, which I also dug into, was an attempt to completely whitewash American empire and paint it as a superior system, he came out with a new video that took it to a whole nother level. These guys have gone full on American empire shills in a way that just, well, there's really no word for it. There's really no way to describe it. I'm just going to have to share some clips with you. But what I'll do is I'll first start out with a bonus clip that's more about China, but it's really bizarre. Let's take a look.
Instead of the central government acting on its socialist promises, it's forcing companies to pay into social welfare programs. Capitalist influence is being destroyed, and it's not for the altruistic reasons you might think. It's to placate and calm the increasingly angry farmers and low-income people. And it's straight out of a Chairman Mao playbook.
So, China has abandoned Mao's socialist promises by making corporations and industry pay into socialism, which also happens to be straight out of Mao's playbook. So hold on a second. Have the socialist promises been abandoned or not? And do you even understand how socialism is funded in a society? And he says for the reasons they're doing this is not for altruistic reasons. They're doing it to respond to the demands and needs of poor people to keep them happy. That's the issue. The government is responding to dissatisfaction. That's a problem for you? You live in San Diego with thousands of homeless people and tents all over the place. I mean, I remember your video with you and Winston talking about how America is better than China because you're more segregated from poor people. But if you did try to interact with some of them one day, how about you ask them how they'd feel if their government was also listening to their grievances? I mean, how much disdain do you need to have for poor people in order to think that this is a bad thing?
It's an open top. It's a T-top, right? So, you know, coronavirus can come in here.
Yeah.
Okay, and when we're next to
mask, yeah.
when we're next to like a homeless dude who's coming up to you, you want to be able to just quickly like flip it on.
Yeah.
Just so you.
I have mine down here.
Yeah, yeah.
Look at
Deposit?
these gangbanger homeless people.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Fucking MS-13 tattoos.
Drugged out meth heads.
Looks like they're getting ready to lounge in the sun.
Why? It's hot. They got some cardboard to sleep on. That's nice. Keeps you away from the snakes.
Yeah, I guess so.
Like, we saw a weird homeless dude today, right? We saw a couple. Okay. Yeah. So this weird Mexican homeless dude is laying there.
Also, when they want to go their luxury shopping, they go to the downtown place that's, you know, frequented by the same people that, you know, maybe those people aren't, the poor people aren't shopping there, but they're still there.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas here, you're literally surrounded by the rich and famous, and it's very clean.
Beautiful scenery,
right.
You know, amazing,
good security
immaculate.
systems.
Yeah, everything is great.
I really don't think I need to add any further comment for this video. So let's move right into the American Apologia Summit from here on. What do we have first?
I know this is a bitter pill to swallow and is very unfair to the people of China, but in order to rule the world, you have to be an influence, not just a bully. Take the USA for example. There's a reason that the USA has so much influence in the world. You see, post-World War II, most of the developed world was absolutely destroyed, in ruins, and getting past this whole empire phase. Think of the UK. At this time, the USA offered the world a deal. They said, as long as it's not the Soviet Union, you can trade with whoever you want. You won't even need to use your own navy to protect your goods because we will do it for you. This new order around the world will be ours, America's, and it's up to you if you want to be part of that or not. Most places in the world took advantage and agreed to the deal. And for the first time in history, countries without massive natural resources or military power could actually grow their economies, and the world, by and large, flourished. The USA let the world do what they want to do.
I really feel like I'm going to be insulting towards my audience if I have to explain what's wrong with this clip. I'm just going to say, if you really think America doesn't bully countries, predominantly bully countries, and they only destroy countries that dealt with the Soviet Union, and they don't prevent trade between various countries, they don't hijack oil shipments from Iran to Venezuela and sell it themselves, if you don't think they let Mexican companies send clean drinking water to Venezuela when they had a drinking water crisis, if you think they let countries do what they want, if you think the countries in the global south without natural resources or even with natural resources experience a net benefit from dealing with America, if you think that democratically elected governments aren't overthrown in favor of dictators more open-minded to the exploitation of their resources by American corporations at the expense of their own people, you really need to pick up a book. Or even just take your head out of the sand for a moment. I mean, that clip was beyond absurd. And the nonchalant way that he says, this new world order will be ours, America's, really says everything in terms of where this guy is in his empire-supporting superiority complex frame of mind. He went on after this to say, and started talking about how America spreads its democracy and freedom around the world. I mean, that's. I mean, you got to be drinking some serious Kool-Aid there to believe that that's what they do. But let's move on to the next clip. I'm only going to do one more from here. You can watch the full clip on your own if you want. It's just absolutely absurd. So next clip.
Every country in the world was supposed to have a shot at success, the American dream style. And now, in 2021, whether you're in Poland or Vietnam or Botswana or Colombia, you benefit from the American-led order. That's the simple truth.
That's the simple truth. And he has the nerve to mention Vietnam, the country that rose up against America's invasion and kicked their asses. But the Vietnamese are better off because of this. Their babies are still being born with birth defects today from Agent Orange. There's 800,000 tons of landmines and unexploded ordnance scattered across the country, and even more in Laos. I mean, what dimension are you living in? These things don't even scratch the surface about what America has done to many other countries since World War II. What I think has happened here is after these guys have been exposed and called out, instead of coming clean about their lies and the grift that they've got going on here, instead of deciding the show's over and try to move on to some more honest content, they've just decided to take the mask all the way off and say, this is what we do. I mean, for everyone else out there who can see through these particular guys, this still serves as an important lesson. I mean, these guys are comically obvious in what they do, but there are others out there who aren't and who are far more skilled than the folks like Matthew Tye and Winston Sturzill and their odd band of merry propagandists and misfits, and are far more nuanced than these guys. And I'm talking about even outside of the China topic. There's a sudden surge of so-called leftist YouTubers who are far more nuanced and will throw you a bone once in a while, but have a common underlying message and framework, which is pro-U.S. empire and foreign policy. You see similar kinds of things with outlets like Bellingcat that appear to be state-sanctioned versions of WikiLeaks, giving you the inside scoop on some pretty shocking Western issues that seem important on the surface, but are far less important than the false narratives they support, which deflect from the more important, urgent, and pertinent empire-preserving lies and scandals that are going on. So with that in mind, all I got to say is make sure you're all staying alert. This is a perfect example of somebody doing their propaganda job way too obviously, but there's a lot of this stuff going on across the board. I think I'm going to wrap this video up here to try and keep my commitment of keeping this as short as possible, but I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time. Peace.